Warren Buffett, arguably the most successful investor in history, just retired at the age of 95 after making a 19.9% annualized return for 50 years, which would turn a meager $10,000 into $193 million in that same time frame. And the man they call the Oracle of Omaha has given away the secrets of his success. In this video, I'll share 5 of Buffett's most powerful pieces of wisdom for high-performance long-term investors. If you're more concerned with building a financial legacy more than just making money on stocks this quarter or this year, then this video is for you. These 5 things are simple, powerful, and apply in almost any type of market. And yet most people you meet will either never know them or not have the discipline to actually follow them. And I'll not only reveal Buffett's 5 powerful ideas, but I'm going to show you with hard data so that your brain knows they work. So number 1 is the power of patience. Buffett's quote is, "The stock market is a device for transferring wealth from the impatient to the patient." Now I really like this one because it goes to show the power of buy and hold investing. And if you check out our last video where we did a study across 3,000 of Navexa portfolios, you'll see most of the time that buy and hold investors outperform active investors quite considerably. Now there's a number of reasons for all of this, but I think it's highlighted with this example. So you can see this investor here bought $10,000 worth of Nvidia back in 2016. A year later, they'd made a bit of a gain, so they completely sold out and realized the gain. Then they sat on the sidelines for a while, then bought back in 2018. Now they've sat on this since 2016 through to now, and they've made a pretty good $380,000 total return. But if we compare that with the investor who bought the same shares in 2016, then simply just did nothing, fast forward to now, and they've made a $2.7 million return. Now, a $300,000 return is pretty good. That's not too shabby, and I wouldn't be disappointed with that. But when you can see over the same time frame, somebody who had the discipline not to do things, they had the restraint not to make the trade, you can see they did like 8 times better than the person who chopped in and out of the same stock. And you'll see a familiar theme through all of these 5 pieces, that strategy has a huge part to play in it. Number 2 is on the time horizon. Buffett's quote is, "If you aren't willing to own a stock for 10 years, then you better not own it for even 10 minutes. Now I really like this one because it strikes at the heart of the beginner investor versus the experienced investor and reveals if you have a strategy or not. Because if you don't have a strategy, then like me back in 2013 when I started investing, I'd buy into a stock, it would dip the next day and I'd freak out about it and quickly sell it. And that was basically me holding it for 10 minutes. And I did this time and time again, maybe 4 or 5 times before I realized, you know what, this can't be the way to win. I need a strategy on how to invest so that I can stop making these stupid decisions. And there's one question for me that sums up whether you have a strategy or not. And that is, can you answer this question for all of your investments? When would I sell this? And I think if you can answer that question for each investment, it means you completely understand the investment and what the criteria is for selling. Now, if your answer is, well, I'll sell it if the price dips, then you don't have a strategy. And I bet you probably are one of these 10-minute investors, not a 10-year investor. Because Buffett also said his favorite holding period is forever. And that sounds pretty crazy, but when you think about that forever attitude, it means you really think about the thing that you're buying, you really understand what it does, and you're okay with holding this forever. And there's a few examples of companies he's done that with, like See's Candy and Coca-Cola, Gecko Insurance. He's a massive investor in Apple. He sees those businesses as a very long-term strength and advantage, and that they'll continue delivering the results. So I think the lesson is there is know what you're buying, make sure you understand it, and then you'll do a lot better than most other people will generally. The third one is around tax efficiency. Buffett's quote is, "The way to defer capital gains tax is quite simple. Don't sell your stocks." And this one is one of those classic, really simple but powerful and hard-hitting quotes. Because yeah, that makes a lot of sense. If you never sell, you never trigger a capital gains tax event and there's no tax. And so Buffett really saw these tax events where you hand over a percentage of your capital gain to the government as a thing that really chips away at the power of compounding returns. So when you buy into something and you leave it alone, it can compound year after year after year. And you can see that when you look at an index like the S&P 500 over a long time. it continues stacking and stacking and stacking. And every time you sell something and it triggers a capital gains tax event, you end up paying somewhere between 25 to 50% of that capital gain to the government. And we all know how great governments are at spending the money. So it's much better if you can retain that money to compound for you than to give it away so it can be inefficiently spent somewhere else. Now, life isn't always perfect where you can buy into an investment with the holding period of forever. There's of course events like you've got to buy a house or buy a car, or there's a wedding or a funeral, or any kind of thing can come up, which means you need to sell some stocks to get some capital. So there are smart ways of going about this, and this is one of the things close to my heart is tax reporting. So as the founder of Nuvexa and who built the tax reporting for Nuvexa, understanding how tax works is critical to getting good returns. So in that moment where you're forced to act, you have to sell some stocks to get some money, you can do it in the most tax efficient way. So you leave behind the most money in your portfolio so it can keep compounding. Now, the opposite is true if you do a tax inefficient sale. You end up taking more money out of your portfolio and damaging that compoundability, if that's a word, into the future. The fourth piece is Buffett around risk. His quote is, "Risk comes from not knowing what you're doing." Now, I really like that quote because it's again one of those, it's so obvious yet so true. If you absolutely know what you're doing when it comes to anything, then there's very little risk that it's not going to work out. But when you've gone into something and you don't know what you're doing, and that whether you're buying a stock or you're learning a skill for the first time or whatever it might be, yeah, the risk is high that you're going to fail. So interestingly, more institutionalized investing thinks about risk in terms of the beta or beta, whichever one that is, around price movements, and they see volatility as risk. But Buffett really thinks this is nonsense, because if a stock that you really love goes from $100 and drops down to 70, it doesn't mean the company is now riskier. It just means that the stock you wanted to buy is now on sale. So the price movement isn't a measurement of risk. It's just a measurement of what the market was doing at that point in time. And again, if you have a strategy, then price movement risk isn't something that you're that worried about. And we can see this time and time again by looking at market crashes. So if we go way back and look at the Black Monday 1987 stock market crash, you can see that all the people without a strategy, or in some cases were forced to sell, lost a lot of money as the market plummeted significantly. But those with a strategy knew, I've seen market downturns before, the market will eventually recover and keep building. And if we look at the long-term chart, which features the 1987 crash, and you look at the next 10 years, you can see that not only did it recover, but it tripled in size over the next kind of 10-year period. Now that's the difference between knowing what you're doing and having a strategy when you go through those turbulent times, versus not knowing what you're doing, being one of those 10-minute holding investors and selling out all the way down in the crash. And we've seen this time and time again with the 2008 GFC, with the COVID crash. If you zoom out on the chart, you can see these crashes are barely a blip on the chart. So again, risk is when you don't know what you're doing. Another bonus quote here from Buffett is, "Be greedy when others are fearful." So he would know as part of his strategy that as the crash is happening, there's a perfect time to be buying up his high quality companies that he would buy, or companies that he owned that he liked. The crash wasn't because the company stopped performing. The crash was simply the market freaking out and people without a strategy selling all their positions. It's kind of a mathematical requirement for you to know how to buy during a market crash, because that's where the biggest returns come from when the market recovers. Number 5 is close to my heart, and that's on annualized return and measuring performance. And the quote, which we mentioned earlier, is our favorite holding period is forever. I think high performance investors like Buffett can think about plans in terms of decades, and it reminds me of the Bene Gesserit from Dune, where they said they tracked their plans in terms of thousands of years, not in decades. Now, as non-fictional humans, we don't have the luxury of living thousands of years or making a 1,000-year plan, but we can think in decades. And I think when you change the mindset, and this not only applies to investing but to any goal you're trying to achieve, thinking in decades not only makes the goal easier to achieve because you have time, but it also means that you have to have a strategy that you follow in order to hit those 10-year goals, which, as I've mentioned in a lot of the other quotes, strategy is a huge part of succeeding with investing. Now, a lot of people I've met and talked to through the course of Navexa get caught out on vanity traps like portfolio value. Now, of course, it's super cool if you build up in $1 million stock portfolio, right? But if it's only doing a 3% annualized return, then you're not even beating inflation. Whereas if you take somebody with an $100,000 portfolio doing a 20% annualized return, that is impressive, and it's only a matter of time before that 100K portfolio smashes past that $1 million portfolio. And that's the difference. When you're measuring performance, you need to be tracking things like capital gain, your income return, your currency return, and the one that everyone forgets about is time, because it's much better to make a return in a shorter amount of time than a longer amount of time, of course. And if you factor time into the calculation, it really reveals if you're a good investor or if you're just a mediocre investor. Now, everyone can get lucky and make make 1 or 2 good trades and make a big return. But the difference is Warren Buffett was making a 19% annualized return every single year. Now, that is crazy impressive, because if you do the maths and look at the compounding, that is how you take the meager $10,000 and turn it into $193 million over that time period. And that is the main reason I built Navexa in the first place, is to give investors the tools to track all of those components of their return to make sure they're growing their wealth in the right direction and, importantly, beating the market. You don't have to use Navexa. You just have to be using something to track that performance. But it is absolutely critical, and if you've watched enough of these videos, you'll know I'll go on about this one until the end of time. So to close this one out, I think we can look at Warren Buffett's performance as he ruthlessly followed the tenets we've just discussed in this video. It's really easy to know the quotes, and everyone knows the quotes about, time in the market versus timing the market, and all the ones we've just mentioned in the video. But how many people do you know who actually apply these quotes? It's easy to collect quotes. It's really hard to follow the advice. So like myself, I have to remind myself all the time to follow these quotes. I want you to as well. And if you're really serious about tracking performance so you can implement all of these strategies and quotes, check out a link in the bio for Navexa, free 14-day trial, and I'll see you in the next video.